ओम सदाशिवसमारंभां शंकराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। वक्रतुण्डमहाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणी विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म श्री गुरवे नमः। So we were looking at the meaning of Sanatana Hindu Dharma. Has a very wide meaning. It doesn't have one single word as a translation. So we can broadly understand Dharma as that which supports the entire universe as it is, how it is functioning, that which supports the life in this universe, and more particularly the order which is actually supporting all these things, because without order none of the things will be possible like it is right now. So there is an order. We saw that there is a physical order, chemical order, biological order, psychological order, like that different orders are there. That's why we are even able to study the nature, and then based on the study only we have all this scientific progress and invention and all that, whatever they are talking about now. But more than all these orders, there is also a moral order, a matrix of right and wrong, which is guiding us in our lives. Okay, so that is the one which is specifically referred to as dharma. So dharma also has the meaning that it is your righteous way of life. Okay, righteousness also you can call it. It includes your duties, your morality, your conduct, virtues, all these things. Then Sanatana, we saw, means eternal. In fact, that which is free from time is Sanatana, really speaking. That which was not started in time has no beginning. Therefore, it does not have any end also, because it is free of our idea of space-time. And again, our dharma does not have any single founder in time. All our avatara purushas, gurus, they were all already born in this dharma only. They were all part of this tradition. They themselves went to a gurukula, studied with a guru. So that is how it is. So that's why it is Sanatana. And Hindu means, we saw that him apashabdam dushayati khandayati iti Hindu. So the one who opposes or destroys adharma, that person is a Hindu. So one who leads a life of dharma, one who is committed to a life of dharma is Hindu. Okay, so, and we also saw yesterday that what do we mean by a way of life? When we say Hinduism is a way of life, our stress is always on achara, our conduct, behavior. The belief systems within that can be many. We have freedom, in fact, with reference to belief. But although all beliefs are not accepted as valid, but you have the freedom to believe still. Nobody is going to say that since you are believing this, you are going to go to hell. So there is no concept like that. But if you do something wrong, you have to face the consequence of that, correct? Karma is there. About karma also we will see in more detail later. But if you do something right, you are going to experience pleasant situation. If you do something wrong, that will not be as unpleasant. That is there. Okay. So our stress is always on achara, and that is why our teachers are all called acharya. Why do we call our teachers as acharya? Because they do not just give lecture. That is in fact easy, correct? Anybody can give lecture, but they have to show whatever they are teaching, they have to show it in their life itself. Okay, they have to show it in their own behavior. They have to live and show you. That is why they are all acharyas. And acharya is really the one who is an example for you to emulate. So the achara of the acharya is your own goal. You try to achieve that. So that is why we call our teachers acharya. So for us, achara is very important. And ours is a knowledge tradition, because our achara is not based on some belief, but it is certain way of looking at the world, ourselves, and if there is a creator, what is the nature of the creator. So we have in our country, in our tradition, different darshanas. So we maybe later on I will show you some slides about our darshanas also. But briefly, yesterday I told you there are 6 Nastika darshanas, 6 Astika darshana. All these darshanas are trying to make you happy really in their own whatever way. They are giving you knowledge about yourself, the world, and if there is a creator, then about the creator also of the world. And by knowing these things properly, you will attain a state of happiness. That is the claim, at least, of all the darshanas. So out of these 12 darshanas, 6 do not accept the Veda and 6 accept the Veda. Now our Sanatana Dharma, the foundational text or foundational, not just one text, it's a whole library, correct? So the foundation of our Sanatana Dharma are the Vedas. Okay. Vedokhila dharma moolam. Like this also there is a saying. Vedas are the moola, means what? Are the source, you can say, of all dharma. So how do we live a life of dharma? To know that, we have to go and understand the vision of the Veda. It is all from the Veda only. So our way of life is actually governed by a certain vision. It is based on a vision only we have a way of life. Okay, although we tell Hinduism is a way of life because achara is important for us, but anybody will say this is my way of life. Correct? If you go to a thief also can say this is my way of life. So what is so special about our way of life when we talk about the Hindu Dharma? Means it is based on a certain vision, and that vision only makes our way of life meaningful. And that vision is something we have to understand. So that is what we saw. Now about this vision, now our Kalyan ji will continue now. Okay, so I will give way and he will take over from me and he will talk about the vision and how wonderful this vision is in fact. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Jayashankar ji. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomavadvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Very happy that I'm able to spend some time exploring what is this vision and how is it linked to the Hindu way of life, the so-called way of life. What is central to the way of life? Okay. So now, when you look at any society, whether it is a religious context, or even as any secular society, today's world, right? There are multiple aspects that goes on in any kind of society, right? Things like culture, there are value structures, there is a literature which is in any society. Take a Western society or an Indian society, there are set of literatures which form core to that set of people, right? And then there are forms to greet each other, like, you know, in Western world we shake hands, you know, in India we say namaste, you know, in some Arab countries they say this. It's a way of greeting people, is a form. So how does a child understand what you are expressing? It's all through forms. So there should be certain forms in any society. And then when you talk about a way of life and vision, is there a teaching associated with it? Who teaches, right? There are preachers in Western context who give discourses, right? And then there are teachers who make you see certain reality, right? That's the difference between a preacher and a teacher, right? Preacher is, he'll say, hey, these are the guidelines you have to follow. That is preaching. But when you say teaching, that means you have a vision and the person who is on the other side is made to see the same vision. That is a teaching. Suppose I say 3 plus 8. 3 plus 8 is equal to 1 plus 5 plus 4 plus 1. So the numbers on the left side and the numbers on the right side are totally different. But then how are they equal? When somebody talks about it and people on the other side are able to understand, that means the vision of the person who is talking about it has been transferred to the one who is on the other side. That is teaching. Similarly, there are folklores, there are theater and dance, there are attitudes which go within each of the society, and that is what is called way of life. So any way of life is hinging on a central vision. So we need to see, when we say the Hindu way of life, is there a common vision, right? That is very important. Then only we can say there is a common way of life that everybody in that particular society is following. Otherwise, everyone has his or her own way of life. Now I'll take some examples. You just think about this, right? One of the things in India, you would have seen a dancer. When a dancer starts a performance, the dancer, he or she, first thing that the dancer does is pray to the earth, Mother Earth. So they look upon it as a Mother Earth, not as an inert stage. And then they prostrate or they pray to it, because they say, I'm going to kick you now for me to perform a dance, and I'm seeking your pardon for it. So what is this? I mean, we know an earth is an earth, right? It's not going to come after you and say, hey, why did you kick me? But then as a dancer, I'm praying to it. Is there a vision behind it, or people don't even understand that earth is inert, right? I'll take one more example. There are multiple examples I'm going to talk about now, which will give a sense of where I'm getting to, okay? We can understand a statue being looked upon as God, right? Idol worshippers is how they call it. Though we have to see whether we really worship idols. But look at it, even a mountain which is as big as, you know, Himalayas or the Arunachaleshwaram, right? The whole mountain is seen as God. So let me call it as God for now, right? It is seen as God, and people know this is mountain and it is made of rocks, but still they look upon it as God. How is it possible, right? This is one of the elements. If you look at the 5 elemental model, earth is one element, right? We know it's an element and it is an inert object. People know that, but still they look upon it as God and they go around it. Now let's look at the second one, a river. Almost every river in India is looked upon again as a goddess, whether it is Ganga or Kaveri or Godavari or Tungabhadra or Tamrabarni, Yamuna, whichever river, Sindh. Not just river, even water itself is considered sacred. How is it? We know water is H2O, right? But is there a vision which makes you see the river as goddess? Then we'll come to the third one, right? Or third and fourth together. Fire or air, the wind. Again, we pray to that. In fact, that entire Arunachaleshwara, that rock, that mountain is considered as an expression of fire. Then you would have heard about Chidambara Rahasya, right? There, if you see this picture, these are all bilwa leaves. And they are just hanging in space. There is no altar or idol behind it. But then we pray. We are not praying to the leaves there. So what are we praying to? It is the space, the dimensional aspect called space. And we know space is something that is there everywhere, but how can we pray? Is there a God? Is space going to listen to you? So what is this, right? So if you again, what we covered is 5 elements, and 5 elements is a way to model what is here. When we say model, everything is a model, right? The atomic model, nuclear model, energy model, whatever. Our own tradition talks about 5 elemental model. So anything that you perceive, whether it is solids or liquids or mountains or the sky or whatever, can be modeled using these 5 things: solids, liquids, heat, gases, and space or vacuum. Right? Everything is a mixture of one. So solids contains of all kinds of solids, right? Whether it is a gold or whether it is a rock, whatever it is. Similarly, liquids, and there are combinations of these. Now, if each of these 5 are seen as God, that means practically we are saying all that we are experiencing in a way are God, correct? Now I'll show you some more examples to show this view, right? I spoke about vision. I mean, vision is central to the way of life. I'll show you a few other things which shows how Hindus deal with nature, right? Trees are considered, whether it is Bali of Indonesia or whether it is a northern India or eastern India or western India or southern India, certain trees are themselves considered as sacred or even God. They go and pray to it, like neem plant. In any part of this country, a neem plant is worshipped to. Tulasi, you know that everywhere we pray to Tulasi. And then you look at the animals, whether it is the cow or even the limbs of the cow, right? The parts of various animals are considered sacred. The head of an elephant is considered sacred. The tail of a cow is considered sacred. Similarly, the simanta of a married woman is considered sacred. And pada of a guru is so. There is even limbs, forget the whole cow, right? Each part of the cow is prayed to. Then whether it is horses or the dog or the policeman, doesn't matter. Elephants, a fish. And then if you see the avatars that we speak about, whether it is Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, every kind of, insects and mammals, everything is looked upon as sacred. Like you would have seen this Tirukazhikundram near Chennai, where even birds come and eat regularly and they were considered sacred, right? And you know about Garuda, you know about Hanumanji, you know about tortoise, about the bear, and even snakes. Snakes are worshipped. Is it because people are afraid of snakes, or is there a central vision? Because whenever Westerners see this kind of a thing, they think that Hindus are afraid of so many things. So the nature made them fear that, right? And because of which they pray to all these. People feared snake, so they worshipped the snakes, right? This is how a Westerner looks at it. But we have a certain meaning behind all this. I'll come to it. But first I want to give a gamut of what all we pray to, right? Then knowledge is considered sacred, whether it is the book or even a teacher's words, even sounds is considered Om Atha. So that it is said, Om Atha, Brahma created this world using these 2 letters, 2 words, Om and Atha. Kantam Vitva Viniryatau Tasman Mangalikau Ubhau. They both are considered sacred because when Brahma created this world, he started with Om Atha. So Om Atha is, even those sounds are considered sacred. And any knowledge is considered sacred. So you don't step on a newspaper just because you don't like the news which is there in the newspaper, right? Irrespective of what is there in the newspaper, you don't step on a paper. Because the knowledge itself is considered sacred. And we worship on a Saraswati Puja, we worship the books. And money, wealth is considered sacred. Right? It's not like, something which is at my disposal. It is seen as a Lakshmi. Similarly, even people, you as sacred. Like when small kids, girls, we prostrate to them. Our own daughter, if they sit here and we garland, and we can prostrate to the same girl who usually prostrate to us, but we are able to prostrate to them. How is it possible? Similarly, old women, Sumangalis, or even adults, elders, and even beggars, nomads, right? We feed them and we prostrate to them. So when these Atithis, when they come, both the giver as well as the receiver, both of them feel blessed. Or Swamiji used to call feeding as twice blessed, because both of them are kept at a pedestal. Even if it is a beggar, it's not that I throw away something to them, let them eat. We prostrate to them and give. So what is there a vision? So when we see, can you see the difference? When we say way of life, there is something unique about how we deal with things, because the life is about relating. You have to understand, from the time a child is born till the time a person dies, the whole life is about relating to something or other, right? Whether a baby relates to its mom, to its dad, to its siblings, to the teachers, to the spouse at some point in time, and people around them. There is a relationship with nature. There is a relationship with, something called God, because people interact with some altar of God, or for now, let's call it as idol. So there is a thing of relating. You relate to the nature. You relate to some Twitter messages or Facebook messages. So the whole thing is about relating. So the human problem is also about relating. The human happiness is also about relating. So how you relate with things around you is what we call as life. Can we understand that? It's all, every human problem. So you have some basic problems, that is okay. Like, I don't have enough money, I don't have good food, whatever. Those are some fundamental problems. But what is more complicated in life is how we relate with people or things around us, or we feel smallness, we feel bigness. Everything is about how I relate with what is here. Either I look upon myself as a very small entity, right? And I'm afraid of things around me. And I am playing multiple roles. As a father, I'm relating to somebody. As a son, I'm relating to somebody. As a daughter, I'm relating to somebody. And each of this role has its own complications. So the life is about relating. How do you relate to a beggar? How do you relate to the person who is giving you knowledge? How do you relate to your own self? All this becomes important. That's why when we talk about way of life, and the whole attitude of reverence that I so far showed becomes very important, because you are always relating to nature, you are relating to wealth, you are relating to the people who are giving you knowledge, you are relating to adults, you are relating to children. So there is a relationship. And then look at this. The crops are prayed to. The are prayed. How do you look upon what is given to you? My parents, when I am born in this world, this is my father, this is my mother, this is my body, this is how my mind is going to be. All that is given. This is the time I am going to be born. It's given to me. 2000 2 is when I am born. Yeah, that is, you don't choose that, right? It is given to you. I am born in Chennai is already given. So even some today's kids are born with laptops or iPads on hand. That is also given. When I was born, we never even could imagine a world which has laptops and iPads, right? Or even a mobile phone. So our world for the initial 25 years was very different from what somebody has been born 25 years before. Because each one is given a certain set of things. So everything, so there are a lot of things which are given to you. So for what is given to you, how do you look upon them? So when you think about a harvest, when you think about food, how are you going to look at it? And diseases. This is very interesting. In India, even diseases are revered. So there is reverence, smallpox, chickenpox, all these diseases. It is called Mahamari, whatever. So it's not because you are afraid of it, but there is a larger vision. And how you relate to it, that's more important, right? Musical instruments, even our gods hold these instruments, right? Whether it is veena or flute or even mridang or tabla, everything is sacred. Why? How do you see this, right? And interestingly, even some modern things. So when Westerners looked at Hinduism, they said Hindus are nature worshippers because they are worshipping this rain, they are worshipping trees, they are worshipping, you know, lightning, because it talks about Indra and Varuna and all that. So we worship cars. Car is not nature. We worship buses. And then doesn't the person who is worshipping it know that it's a camcorder? There is no God inside it. But then we don't find anything wrong in worshipping. So what is the vision? And guns. Look at this. People worship guns, swords. And recently our defense minister he went and brought this Rafale and he worshipped it. And what is ultimate in our religion is even death we worship. Because that is also a given. So anything which is given is seen as Ishvara or God. Because you are in the scheme of whole. And death is given to everything. And it's a common phenomenon which is unavoidable, whether it is for an inert object or for a living thing, right? Everything starts in time and goes away in time. That means death is a ultimate reality when you look at the whole, the total. So we don't have a problem in worshipping death. And more interestingly, whatever we saw are slightly different, right? Or we are talking about, elephants and animals and all that, even death. We saw some cars and stuff like that, but this is interesting. We can take a lump of turmeric, okay, from a bottle, pour water and make a lump, and then say, hey, may Ganesha come and sit in this turmeric. And then I pray. And after some time, prayer is over, I'll say, may Ganesha go away from this turmeric. And then I take the turmeric and throw it away. So how is this possible? See, at least in other cases, you keep them there and you are constantly seeing them as God. But here, you are just taking turmeric for some half an hour or even 10 minutes, you are saying, here is my God. And then after 10 minutes, it's no more my God. Correct? We all do that at home. Then this Ganesh Chaturthi, you just go to a river, take some clay, and then however you can make Ganesha, you make, and then say, from now this is Ganesha. And after one day, you just throw that into a pond, saying, Ganesha, please go away from this. And this is Amarnath. You know about Amarnath, right? Nothing but ice, snow. The person who is worshipping also knows it's snow. But we see Shiva there. And this is all about things which are on the earth, right? Even outside of earth, sun is seen as God. And for this person, not just sun, every planet is seen as God. Anything that you see, don't see, doesn't matter. As long as there is a concept that it exists somewhere, it's God. Okay, now I'll summarize this, right? We have seen whether it is set of nature like mountains, rivers, fires, sun, star, planets, whatever. We don't have a problem worshipping them. We sincerely worship them. Trees, animals, insects, reptiles, plants, crops, harvests, and then all these instruments. And then your clay, turmeric, snow, ash, nuts like Rudraksha and all we worship. We know it comes out of some fruit, right? Not that we don't know. But then we can relate to it, revere it, because it's all given in the scheme of things. And there is something special about some of these things. So we can relate to it and worship. Then about money, books, wealth. And even on people, right? Whether you are angry with somebody, but at that time, you can invoke them as God, right? Even your own elders. You may fight with them one day. Next day morning, there is some puja, you will do puja to them, you will prostrate to them. How is that possible? Because at that time, you are not seeing them just as that person, correct? So when a small girl is at that time, you don't see that Kanya as that person. You see something else beyond that person. When you are worshipping a rock or a mountain, you are not just seeing that mountain. You are seeing something beyond that mountain, correct? That's why you are able to worship. When you are worshipping a turmeric, you are not worshipping a turmeric because you know it is turmeric. It's not that I am worshiping, hey, turmeric, please, give me all this wealth. We are not saying to the turmeric that you are turmeric, so I am praying to you, right? But we are saying you are the omnipresent Ganesha. That is called invocation. Avahanam. So you are invoking the God there. So what is this invocation? Similarly, like houses, entrance to house, is all considered sacred. Temples, the whole temple is considered sacred. You don't, that not just that idol of the God which is inside, right? The entire temple itself is God. That's how we see that. That's why a Gopura Darshanam alone is enough. That's what they say. You don't have to get in. The whole thing, right? And the whole house is considered sacred. The entrance is considered Lakshmi. Our own body parts, when we do the puja, we first do Atma Puja, right? Soham Bhavena Pujaye. So it says, when you start the puja thinking that whatever I am praying to is not different from me. And in fact, we put tilaka, everything, because we see this body itself is just like how I relate to something which is outside as God, I can relate to what is inside this body also as God. That's why we can do Atma Pradakshanam. You are not able to go around the God. Then what do you do? Because there is some block there. What do? You just go around yourself and then say, I have done the Pradakshanam. Means you are seeing God in your own body also. Because if you are seeing God everywhere, you don't have a problem in you also, right? So if you look at Hindus, how many gods we have? We can see this Navratri Golu. From the fruits to some, this snake, piper, to some cricketer, all the way to Venkateshwara and Ganesha, everything is seen as God. And you prostrate to it. So there is no end to Hindu gods, correct? That is why Westerners say that Hindus don't have clarity. They are idol worshippers. Anything and everything that they are afraid of, which they don't understand, they just call them God and then prostrate to them. because they are not able to deal with the fear of unknown. That is how they conclude. But like I said, we need to understand this carefully, because the whole life, I said, is about relating, and you have to relate to so many things which are there, and you are not alone. You are part of a whole thing called samashti. So that is the central vision. Okay, so we need to understand the central vision in order to be able to understand why we are worshipping so many things, why we are relating to certain things with reverence, why is our literature talking about certain things with reverence, why is our music and dance, everything is only about God and all these things. So look at our way of life. When we go for a recreational tour, we go to some Kailasa or some Parani or some Venkateshwara. So you are climbing mountains, but then it is a religious trip. When you take bath, it is a religious. When you do a marriage performance, that is also religious. When child is born, that is considered a sacred thing. When death happens, that is considered sacred. So how is it everything is related to in a different way? Because there is a central vision, and the vision is you are part of the whole. At the same time, you are also the whole. You are part of a big scheme of thing. There is a universal set of orders which Jaishankar ji spoke about. When I say I am this physical body, every living being has a physical body, correct? An ant has a physical body, a rat has a physical body, a cat has a physical. But there are certain things. Everything has a certain, flow of blood or whatever, some way of, bringing it all together. Everything has some form of a skin. So when you test something on a rat, you take that to also human at some point in time with some changes. That means with the physical body, there is a certain biological order, a biological commonality. That's why you can study a biology, right? Anatomy. There is a knowledge of study because there is a commonness, there is a uniformity across all living beings in term, but there are certain variances, we don't deny that, but there are also a broad set of commonalities. That means there is an order called a physiological order or biological order. So there is a totality. So when I am breathing, I also breathe, animals also breathe, plants also breathe, and there is air outside. So there, it is all connected. The whole breathing, there is also a totality. So there is a whole. So you are part of that whole. You are not alone. Even planets, they say it influences you. So because there is a totality, because look at the life forms, right? I need water. I have been right? The water is given, not constantly created. So there is a mechanism which has been put in place where the water evaporates and the cloud moves to your place in the land and it falls as rain somewhere and it comes as a river towards you and then it goes underground as a groundwater and you are able to drink it. So much of mechanism has been put in place so that the water need of you is fulfilled. And you have to see something, right? Your eyes are seeing this wall is white. Means what? It should have certain way to reflect light and the light has to go into your retina, whatever, and then it has to go to your brain and you should be able to recognize it. The whole scheme of things is already given to you. And there is a whole and you are part of that whole. Correct? So there is a certain reality. Now what has a religion to do with this? Is very important. We are connected to the whole. We are not just an isolated being, right? there is an order by which we are connected to the whole. There is a whole, right? Whether it is a physiological order, there is a biological order, or I spoke about prana, right? Breath. It's all connected to one whole. Now, what has this to do with religion, right? Because we can see generally two sets of religions, right? One set is the Abrahamic religions, which are primarily centered around gods and belief on gods. So what they say, they define a god, okay, with certain qualities. We also do that. I'll come to that, the difference. But they define a god, the God who is merciful, who salvages you, that kind of there are certain good attributes that the God has and speak. So when we talk about the Western religions, the Abrahamic religions, they are centered around the concept of God, right? The God is defined as similar to a human person somewhere in heaven with some people define them as with a human kind of form, or some define as formless, whatever. And there is also Trinity and all that spoken about in certain religions. But in one or other format, the concept is it's some person, right? So God is a person located somewhere, and you as an individual is created along with this world for you to come and enjoy and experience this world. That is the basic concept. But then why do we need the God? They say if you believe in this God and seek the God's pardon for some kind of sin done by not just you but people before you, whatever, and you say that I trust in you as a God, then that God salvages you and takes you once you die to an eternal heaven. So many of the religions talk like that, correct? So we would have studied. The God is a very merciful, he is very kind, and he protects the believers so that once you die, you are salvaged and you actually have a eternal heaven. So many religions, even Jewish, has some kind of a God, and this is their kind of, and there are some other nuances to it because I haven't studied it entirely, but this is central to those kind of religions. So that is one set of religions. Audio is okay, right? Okay. Now there is a second set of religions like the Buddhism, Jainism and all that, which are not centered around God. They have certain values and karma and all that. There are certain guidelines on how you live and all that. They also talk a little bit about way of life because they talk about the cycle of karma and those kind of things. And they talk about nirvana, where you attain a state even when you are living, where you are free from all this problem. And they, like Buddhism for example, it looks upon the world as a dukkha, like a suffering. Buddha primarily focuses on suffering, and then he says it is all delusional. So you reject all of it, you attain a nirvana, and then you are liberated. So this is the second set of religions, which even like Jainism in some form talks like that, Anuparimana and all that, right? Hinduism is somewhere in between if you look at it, because we have gods, but we don't have one God like a Christianity or Islam, which says there is only one God. There is no, or Trinity as a God. Or God is in the form of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, right? In Christianity. Now, beyond this, there is no God, right? That is what they say. But Hindus, like we saw, not only we talk about 33 crores of gods, but everything we see we take as God, right? Like just now we saw, from mountain to rivers to a sword to Raphael, everything is God. That is one. But we also have all this karma theory, all those things, rebirth. So it is little bit of everything is how it looks. So let me take this now. Are Hindus then idol worshippers? From what we saw in the last half an hour, we can clearly say we are not idol worshippers, because we don't even need specific idols. Turmeric is not an idol. Mountain is not an idol. Sound is not an idol. Like Om, is that an idol? It's not an idol. Camcorder is not an idol, right? Idol means it should have a leg, hand, some sword and all that, right? Eyes, nose. It should look like a human, some kind of. So we are not idol worshippers, right? Then what do we worship? We use altars of worship. You have to understand, not idols, but altars of worship. And what is this altar? Suppose you want to greet somebody, okay? Someone is coming from London, okay? So you are going to meet that person, right? You go to some Taj Coromandel and meet one, Edward, right? What do you do? Do you shake that whole person? You don't. You just shake that person's hand. Why? Is it because you like his hand? No, because you are greeting that whole person by just shaking his hand, or do namaste, whatever. What is that? It's a form. So there is a form of greeting a person. A worship is also a form of relating to the total. But to worship, we need a form. That form is an altar of worship. An altar of worship makes you relate to the total. That is number one. Because there is an understanding that all that is here is given for me to experience, and there is a totality, and that totality is what sustains me. When I breathe, I am given the air. When I have a body, I am given the food. When I need water, there is a hole which gives me water, right? Now suppose, just let us suppose that all this is one conscious entity which is giving me all this. Then I relate to that total because I am part of that total. So that is, you are not worshipping an idol, but you are worshipping, you are using a form of worship through an altar of worship to relate to the whole. Because now let's come to what is the vision, right? The vision, we will cover this in future sessions, but at a broad level, the vision of a Hindu, central vision of the Hindu religion is not there is one God, or not that there are many gods, nor we say that, we don't say that there is no God like a Buddhist, but we say there is only God which is here. That means the total, the omnipresent is what is God, and it's not an inert thing. It is a conscious one whole which is God. Okay, this is the premise. This is the central vision. Now, is it a belief? When I say there is one God who is sitting in heaven, you need to believe that. Why? Because that God is not going to come down now to meet you. They say only after you die, you will meet that God. And after you die, you are not going to come back as the same person. Correct? So there is no, you are not going to be able to verify that whatever this guy says is true or lie. then it is called a belief if you go with that kind of a thought, correct? Anything which is not verifiable is a pure belief, non-verifiable belief. Now I say all that is here is God. You have a choice, some kind of a choice. You can choose to just believe it and live your life, okay, or disbelieve it. The both I will categorize it as one choice, right? You can choose to believe or disbelieve and carry on with your life, either with the belief or without the belief. The second option is, if everything here is God, then I should be able to know that. It can't be a matter of belief. So, is there a way I can learn, I can understand? That is called teaching, because whoever is going to tell you that all that is here is God has to show you how all that is here is God. He can't say, this is what some text has told, so you better believe it if you want to be a Hindu, otherwise you will go to hell. I can't tell that to you, because you can ask the question, what is, I don't care about hell and all that. You are telling me that whatever I am experiencing here is God. You better prove that to me, correct? That's what you will ask. Otherwise, you will ignore this person and go. Therefore, there needs to be a teaching. The teaching in our Hindu religion is about showing that all that is here is God. That is the teaching. Okay. Now, I may not be immediately going for the teaching, for learning. Everybody is not going to go and learn, right? But whoever is the elder within the religion, within the Hindu thing, they have seen this reality. Now, they can, even without you understanding that everything is here as God, you can still relate to everything as though it is God. That is where all the cultural and other elements come into play. The literature shows you in some way that everything here is God. Okay, you don't understand how everything is God, but it gives you stories. Similarly, the forms, that is where whatever we saw today, all the forms, any kind of form, any kind of object can become an altar of worship for you. It doesn't matter whether it is turmeric or whether it is snow or whether it is some lump of clay, or if it is your mother-in-law or father-in-law or your own child. If you want to invoke, just like by shaking the hand of the person, you are invoking a greeting for the entire person. So if you have to touch the ocean, what do? You don't have to go and touch every part, right? Just go and stand at one corner and touch. You touch it, and at say in Bay of Bengal. The same thing, you are also touching Indian Ocean at the same time, right? Because it is one continuum. Similarly, when you are greeting a person by shaking the hand, you are greeting that entire person. So if everything here is God, you can touch anywhere and still invoke that God. You see where it is headed? By touching in the Chennai beach, Marina Beach, you touch the Bay of Bengal water, you are touching the entire Indian Ocean, because it is one continuum. Similarly, if everything is God, just assume, right? For now, we are only assuming. If suppose everything is God, then you can invoke that God in any one form as an altar of worship. You don't need a particular God, assembly of God. You don't need that. You don't even need a temple. You can just invoke the god in turmeric, and even if turmeric is not there in your own body, you can invoke. It doesn't matter. You close your eye and invoke the god in your own self, and you can relate, because the fact is that God is everything. Therefore, the forms means every form is valid because it is all one whole. That is why it is way of life. Because in your life, this vision is built into your life through the samskara, through how you relate to your teacher. Because relating, that's why I was saying, relating is what is life. So how you relate to your teacher, how do you relate to the knowledge? Because you are not competing, you are accepting. See, that is why the religion becomes very important, because it is psychologically very important to relate to things in a particular way. Otherwise, you are pitted against everything else. See, a person who doesn't relate in this way will see everything as a competition. Because I have a threat, every other person is a threat. Every other planet is a threat to me. Every other country is a threat, because I am such a small thing in the scheme of things. There are so many planets, there are so many galaxies, there are so many nations, there are so many people. Each one is trying to grab his or her own piece in this world, right? And everything is a competition. Money, it's not coming to me. Knowledge, I am not getting. My brain is not grasping things. So everything becomes a problem. Because the way you are today relating is that you are pitted against all this. So that kind of relating is the problem. So the religion becomes important if it can solve your problem, not by enforcing some belief on you and then say you believe in this person, so when you die you go somewhere. That means what? They have given up on you so long as you live in this world. As long as you live till the time you die, there is no way you can escape. You are condemned to have all this problem. Once you die, we will take care, is what they are saying. Correct? That doesn't help you in relating to this world. Now, the other vision, which is the Vedic vision or Hindu vision, is different. You are part of the whole. Everything is given. You are there for a reason. Everything here is for a reason, and it is a part. You are part of that whole. So you relate to it in a way of reverence, not as though you are pitted against them. Now, once you start relating to it that way, then everything becomes a way of life. Your way of life is actually to relate to it with reference. That is why Hinduism is a way of life, because it goes with the central point of a vision that there is only God, and the culture, value structure, literature, forms, everything is aligned to that vision. Therefore, it is way of life. Okay. So I think we are coming to, we have crossed the time. Yeah, if you want to take some questions, huh? Okay. Okay, there is a question. I am feeling, yeah, I think I already answered this. Why I am not, in the case of turmeric, I don't, there is only turmeric, I am unable to reconcile. I already explained that everything being God, you can invoke it on anything. That is a concept. Okay, so the only thing I haven't touched today is, then what about all the specific forms, right? Ganesha, Shiva, Vishnu, what about those? So we need to see why those forms, the specific forms are important. We don't have time for it today, but we will see that. Okay. Then there is a question, why to have Pada Puja? Okay, Pada Puja, see, there is a difference in how we relate to different people, correct? When we are having, how we relate to a teacher or a guru is very different, because with a guru, we are in an attitude of kinkaraha, kim na karoti iti kinkaraha. That is, we are in a total submission. The reason we have to be in total submission for a person who is giving us this Vedanta Jnana. We will cover all this later. It is too complex to take it up now. But I'll just give a very simple 1 minute explanation, because this knowledge is addressing your core nature. It is trying to make you understand your core nature. And when you are trying to understand your core nature, there could be lot of difficulties. So a submission to a person like this will help you. Okay, that's why we have a certain reverence to the teacher, and that is why we do Pada Puja, because it creates that kind of a relationship with somebody who is trying to make you see that you are whole. Okay, we'll see those things later. It is too early to discuss that. No problem. Yeah. Okay, there are any questions? Then we'll. Okay, being part of the whole, you are immersing, that is fine. But the more important thing is, if you are not just part of the whole and you are the whole, then the question has to be, then why I don't know it? Okay, that is where it should go. Okay, not only immersing yourself, but we will see those in the later classes. Okay, any other questions? What happens after we die? Okay, we'll see that. Life and death is a much larger question. More than what happens after we die, you have to understand what is happening now when you are sitting and listening to this, right? Who are you? That itself we don't know. Then only you can understand what happens after you die. First is who are you, what is happening right now is important, right? Death comes later. Is there a rebirth? Well, is there a birth is a question you have to ask. Okay, if everything is one, is there a birth? Okay, I think if God is everywhere all the time, why are we obligated to celebrate? Okay, we'll answer in the next class. This is a good question. We invite God, do Pada Puja, praise. Is it like that? Is correct. There is a methodology of doing puja, because human beings need, that's why I said that you need forms. Without forms, you can't relate, because it's so simple, right? I can't just, suppose a guest comes there, I can't just keep just sit idle in front of him and not talk to him, not do anything, right? That's not how human nature is. So we need certain forms. So even in worship, we need certain forms so that you can relate to the God who you are invoking. So there is a structured way of relating. That is what is done in a puja. All your, achamaniyam and all that. In those days, when a guest comes, they do all this. They'll wash their feet, they'll give them water, they'll make them eat food, and then after which they'll give them betel leaves and they will fan them, right? And then they'll give them some money and then they'll send away. That is how an Atithi was treated. So they created a puja paddhati which is very similar to that, so that you can relate to the God in a way. Why do we go on pilgrimage and temple? We'll address all that because it will take some time. Remembrance of each God's action through all the festivals like Rama's victory. Yeah, that's fine. That's all guna, right? So when you say there is a form, that's why I said the specific forms like Ganesha, Rama and all that, we haven't addressed. We today have only addressed that everything is God thing, right? Naturally, the question is, if everything is God, then why specific form? Why Rama? Why Ganesha, right? We need to address that. We'll talk about it later. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.